Seated, we're going to start on our knees, if that's comfortable for you, with a block or a blanket between your knees. If that's not comfortable for you, just sit any way that's comfortable. But it's just kind of a way to start getting us going. We're specifically going to target the hips today, so this might find a little different action in the hips today before we start. So once you found that comfortable seat, let your eyes close. Draw up through the chest, drop down into the sit bones, whether it's on the blanket, a block, maybe all the way on the mat if you're seating cross-legged. Just allow yourself to arrive in your room, on your mat, in your body. Start to connect with your surroundings. Allowing yourself to become more present with every passing moment. Notice things in your surroundings that might distract you today, things that might pull you out of your practice, and kindly invite them to be part of your practice. Invite them to not be a distraction, but to be part of the process. This can include things that are physically there with you. This could include things that are there with you mentally or emotionally. Allow them to be there with you today. Acknowledge them. Give them a little attention, but then always bringing yourself back to those sensations that are happening in the body. And then scan over the body here, check in, acknowledging how you're feeling, knowing we're going to target the hips specifically today. Check in with those areas of the legs, the low back, the spine. So take a nice deep inhale here. And sigh out. And then start to check in mentally, acknowledging what type of week it's been, maybe what type of day it's been. And start to settle in on an intention for your practice. Maybe it's to find more stillness. Maybe it's more awareness of the sensations happening in the body. Maybe it's finding compassion or comfort for yourself. Whatever comes to mind today for your practice, let that intention take form in your mind's eye. Then bring your hands, either cupping them over your heart center or bringing them in front of your heart with your hands pressing together, your thumbs touching your chest. We'll set that intention with one sigh of the breath today. Just take a full inhale. And let it go. Allow your hands to drop down to your thighs again. And allow yourself to just drop into this space a little bit more, tuning in with your breath. Finding equal parts breath. Usually our exhale is a little bit longer than our inhales. See if you can have those inhales become a little bit deeper. And then have them match your exhales. Whatever's going to be best to you, no forcing, no expectations. Just allow the breath to become equal in pace. Start to notice the sensations that happen in the body as you are starting to equalize your breath. Take a full inhale here. And sigh it out. Allow your eyes to blink open, reminding yourself to move slowly. And we're going to transition to seated. Using a bolster or a cushion or a blanket underneath your hips to begin for this one, and have a little bit of a diagonal at the top. And you're gonna come to a seated twist. So you have options here. If it's more comfortable for you to sit cross-legged and do a twist to the right, you have that as an option. But we're gonna try and go a little bit deeper. So see if you can slide that left leg under a little bit more beside you, coming right up onto those sit bones. And then taking that right leg, either keeping it on the inside of the left foot, or if it feels okay for the hips, take it to the outside. So this might be your edge. You might be feeling a lot of sensations in your outer hip. And then add the twist. So you're just gonna start to hug. So our hands are gonna stay on our thighs to begin today. We're just gonna start to find a little rotation. And then once you're there, settle in for time. So find that stillness. We're gonna hold each of these poses for 3 minutes today. And so talking a little bit about those meridian lines, those energy channels that move throughout the body. And it said when there's some kind of discomfort or something that's not working in the body in Chinese medicine and Taoist traditions, that these energy channels are blocked. And so what's good is to move the body in certain ways to kind of compress these energy channels. And as I alluded to before, there's a few ways to press these, and one is acupuncture using little needles. The other is acupressure, so you're applying pressure kind of like we are now in this pose to where you feel a sensation. Directed awareness to where you feel a place that has a little bit of discomfort and you bring your attention there to bring more energy to that space and maybe more openness. And then using your breath, so directing your breath. So those are the 4 ways that you can move energy in your body. And the meridian lines contain those energies. And basically they're big loops in your body. There are over 70 different ones, like little tiny ones throughout the body. There are 14 main ones that are talked about, and 6 of those are yin. And for the most of those, they start in the feet and work their way up to your head. And then on the counterpart with the yang ones, they work from the head down to the feet in a big loop. So with this twist, one of those meridian lines we're following, if you're starting to feel a little bit of that sensation in your outer hip, that's the gallbladder meridian. And the meridians all relate to an organ in the body. They may or may not pass through that body, but they go near that body part. If you feel it along the spine, down your lower spine and up, that might be your urinary bladder that you're stimulating, that's that line. So they're just energy channels, and we're trying to compress them so that we can open them and kind of get out any blockages that might be starting to occur. And as you're settling here and finding your stillness, if you notice that the edge of your comfort zone has dissipated, you can always go a little bit deeper by maybe taking that right hand, bring it behind you for a little deeper twist into the upper back. Your head can be any way that's comfortable, neutral, to the back or to the front. And just check in with your breath. Notice if you still have that even breath that you had at the beginning. Take a full inhale here. And let it go. Slowly come back to center. Go ahead and uncross the legs, take those legs out in front of you. And just pause there for a moment. Doing any motions that feel good. Or just sitting with the stillness, the rebound of that pose. Noticing if you can sense the energy moving through the leg, into the outer hip, into the spine. Now that you've pressed that area, that channel, now it's kind of releasing through. So then maybe lean back a little bit into the hands, open the chest, wiggle the legs for a moment. Then we'll move to the opposite side. So going for a twist to the left this time if you can. That right leg's going to draw under, come up onto those sit bones, and then either that left leg's to the inside or to the outside. And just know you're going to have different sides. This is normally my tighter side, my side that's less mobile. And then pause there, check in, come into that slight twist, come to that edge, that first edge. And then do any little wiggles that you need to so that you can then settle into stillness. Find your breath. And then notice the sensations in the body. Notice if you're feeling it more in the outer hip or in the spine. Maybe you're feeling it more in that bottom leg. Just notice those sensations. With these energy channels, we're working to work through them with there being so many, you might affect different areas. There might be different areas that are affected when they're blocked. And we'll go into those throughout this month of Yin classes of what areas might be blocked if you're having some different symptoms. But today is just to familiarize with these main 6 channels of the Yin side. As we talked about before, if you're feeling on the outer hip, right, it's running through the gallbladder line. If you're feeling it more into your spine, your low back, it's the urinary bladder line. But then we also have other lines that we're going to be getting into today. There's also the liver and the kidney meridians. There is the stomach and spleen meridians. And as you notice, most of those are in the lower half of your body. So a lot of the Yin poses we deal with are seated poses and poses that get into those. So they're a little bit more affected. And anytime your edge kind of dissipates without fidgeting too much, maybe bringing that left hand down back behind you and deepening the intensity of that edge without going over the edge. And so these energy channels kind of sit in between the fascia, that kind of like saran wrap material that wraps around our muscles. And so our muscles are each wrapped with those, and that big, thick layer of fascia, those lines kind of run in between those. So when our muscles are relaxed, we can really compress and get into those lines a little bit more. One of the reasons for Yin to be more of a less energetic muscle holding practice, like our normal Hatha yoga classes, our flow classes, we're more relying on those connective tissues, so we can get in deeper into those meridians in our body, into those energy channels. Just a few more breaths here. Take a full inhale here. And side out. And slowly bring yourself back to center. Go ahead and release the arms and legs, bring them out to center. Maybe just pause for a moment with the stillness. Seeing if you can notice that energy flow a little bit more through the hips and legs, maybe through the back and spine. And maybe start to bring a little bit of movement into the body if it feels good, or stay with the stillness. So that was a good prep pose for our next pose, going into shoelace pose. So little bit deeper into the hips here. We're going to start with our left leg on top. So you have one option, just take that left leg, you're going to bring it over and see if you can place it so it's coming over that right leg. If there's not much sensation there, you can take that right leg and bend it back as well. And then you have a little bit more intensity. So using any props you need to, maybe your feet aren't as equal, maybe you need a little prop under the bottom knee because if that's bothering you, or the top knee. But we're going to fold forward here, and when I fold forward, I like to have a little bit of cushion in between my belly and thigh. That really helps me round my spine, because we're going to get into this spine here. And you're just going to slowly start to round forward. And if your head is okay, you can leave it up or let it dangle. If it's close enough to your knee, maybe you place a block or a pillow, or place it directly on your knee. Just kind of leaning forward. So again, primary target, the hips, outer hips. You might feel a little bit into the knees. Take a moment here and tense those muscles of your legs. And then relax them as you exhale. So really just let the energy of the muscles relax. Let yourself round forward and then find some stillness. So we had talked about the meridian line on the outer hips, which you might be feeling on that left side, is the gallbladder meridian. If you're feeling it kind of in your inner knees, your thighs, or your groin, where those legs are squeezing together, that is your liver and kidney meridians run through those areas. And if you're feeling it along your back, maybe on the back of the bottom leg, that's going to be targeting the urinary bladder meridian. So those areas are being compressed, trying to tap into that energy. Those places you feel the most sensation, see if you can bring some directed awareness. Guide your breath to that area. See if you can help it release and find a little bit more movement to go into a little deeper edge into that area. Just building that awareness of what's happening in your body. And I am holding myself up with my hands, but if it feels good to you and you have that, let your arms relax completely. I'm just staying a little bit more upright so you can hear me. So if you can completely kind of relax and let yourself go. If that feels good. Just a few more rounds of breath here. Take a full inhale here. And let it go. Slowly make your way back up. And then very slowly unwind those legs, drawing the top leg up first. Ooh, moving slowly, sitting in any place that's going to feel good to you, just to feel the effects of that pose. A lot of times with the yin practice, I do feel older. I feel like I'm more stiff, but then later that day, I feel amazing. Or even the next day, I feel amazing. And then any motion, sometimes it feels good to do a little windshield wipers here. So we do a lot of internal rotation, so that external rotation of the legs feels good. And then as you're ready, transitioning to the other side. So the left leg will start straight. You're gonna bring the right leg over the top. Knees are closer together. Right foot's beside you. If you feel that sensation in the hip, stay there. If you wanna go a little bit further, lean over to the left, draw that left leg in, sitting up tall. And then using any props that you need to for comfort. If you feel a little pinching in the hip joint, sometimes I feel that and I just kind of press down into that and kind of roll my hip out a little bit more so there's less of that pinching sensation of my hip bone on the meaty part of my thigh there. And then settle in, right? If it feels good, start to bend forward. If it doesn't feel good, stay upright and settle in for that time. Just noticing where you feel it. And for a while, when I first started doing Yin without studying it, I was confused with the meridian lines. I always felt like, well, yeah, I feel it in my outer hip, and yes, I feel it in my knee, and yes, I feel it in my groin. So does that mean that all those meridian lines are blocked and I need to work on them? But those aren't having those sensations aren't the symptoms. So as I said, we'll go on as we specifically target certain meridian lines individually. I'll talk about the different effects that could be affecting you if those areas are blocked. So if you're feeling the sensation, it means you're targeting that area, which is good, because we want to target those meridian lines so that we can help energy flow through them. So if you're feeling your outer hip, if you're feeling your knees, your inner groins, your spine, that's a good thing. You may not be feeling all of them. You may only be feeling one. Or you might be feeling every single one of those places. All is okay. Find those equal parts breath. Settling in, see if you can find a little bit more stillness. And use your breath to direct energy toward any areas that really feel a little bit tighter. Take a deep inhale here. And let it go. Slowly making your way all the way back up. And then slowly drawing that top knee in, taking that top leg out and then the bottom leg if it's not already, and just pause for a moment. Noticing the effects of that pose on the body. Seeing if you can feel a little subtle energy running through those areas, through those channels of the inner thighs, knees, outer hip, maybe even into the spine. So as this practice is targeting the hips, we're going to continue moving into the hips. This next one can be very challenging. This one can be a lot of stimulation. So I'm going to give quite a few options and pause where it feels best for you. I like to sit up on something. I need a little bit more lift. This one's called deer pose, or it's also been called pinwheel. So I like to take my bolster, just have it a little bit higher. I'm going to sit right on the edge of it. And then I'm going to have my left leg is going to come in toward my groin. And then my right leg is going to come back behind me. So kind of like a hero's pose. So I'm going to just sit right up on the top of that, more on the left side is that bolster going to be under maybe more of my left sit bone, right? So this is your first phase. If you're feeling it in your knees, in your hips, or your ankles, stay here. This is where you're going to be. If you want to go a little bit further, you're going to try and bring this right knee a little bit more back so your right knee is in line with your hip. So it's coming out from your hip. And that's why I like to have the bolster under my left hip, because I know I'm going to kind of lift up, so that just kind of makes them equal a little bit. So that's out there. If it feels okay, your left ankle, or sorry, your right ankle and knee can kind of slide out to the side. So again, deep outer hip right here is where you probably are feeling it. And then you're going to stay there. Maybe you're not feeling this. Eventually, you're just going to try and take this front foot and draw it out forward. So you're kind of creating a little 90-degree angle with your knee and your ankle on the front side. So it's kind of created this little half pinwheel of your body. So you might have a tendency to lean to your left, totally fine, right? You might need to come up on your fingertips because we're targeting that right hip. If there's any deep pain or tingling sensation in this right knee, draw that right heel more closer toward your bum. And then if that still doesn't do it, bring it more forward again. So you'll just target a little less in the hips. Maybe you're more flat on the floor. So again, yes, a little more deep in this one. This is one we haven't really done yet in the series. And just breathing. And if it feels sensitive for the knee, sometimes this knee feels a little sensitive for me on the floor. I just prop it up with a pillow, and it takes that sensation of the floor pressing into those tendons so I can relax the muscles. Just breathing through here. So if you're feeling it in this front leg, maybe on the outside or the inside groin, that's stimulating the gallbladder meridian. If you're feeling it up in the ribs, that's also stimulating that gallbladder meridian. If you're feeling it on this inner groin here, on the right side, that's more of the liver and kidney meridians. And if you're feeling it in this thigh and in this outer hip, right, you're getting into the stomach and spleen, getting into those meridians. If you're feeling okay with the edge of the intensity of the stretch on your right hip, and you'd like to add a little bit of a twist, you're just going to rotate toward that left leg, and then maybe start to walk forward a little bit. If that feels good folding forward, maybe you continue your twist and you walk your hands maybe a little bit over more toward the left. All the while you're doing that, you're trying to be heavy in the legs, trying to relax the muscles. It all depends on how you're feeling. You have about another 30 seconds here. Notice your breath, notice the sensations happening in the body. Taking a full inhale here. And let it go. Slowly come back upright if you're folded forward. And then lean to the left, draw that right leg forward. Come into a little butterfly, or even taking the legs out in front. And just pause for a moment. So as you're pausing here, taking a little rebound from this pose, I'm just going to kind of show you if I didn't have the bolster underneath, what it would look like with my opposite side. So as I come into this, and I'm getting ready to come into this, you'll notice my left hip kind of already comes up. And if I'm trying to come out and create that shape, I'm just already leaning over too much to where it's putting me over my edge because my hips aren't level. So that's one of the reasons why I prop up the opposite hip, so that then when I create that space, I have a little bit more space to where I can sit upright, to where I don't have to engage my muscles so much. So that's the reason for my bolster. Maybe you're okay and you can sit all the way on the ground like that, and that's great. Everybody's different. It just depends on where your hips are in relation to your pelvis, so where that hip socket is in your pelvis. So we'll go to the other side. So I'm going to take my bolster under my right hip. I'm going to take my left leg and draw it back behind me and draw my right leg in toward my groin. So just pause there. And then just see how that feels. And again, both sides are going to be a little bit different. You might already be feeling that targeted area of that left hip. If it's okay, start to take that left knee, draw it back more so your knee and your hip are in line. And then if it's okay, start to draw that ankle and knee in line so you're creating a nice little 90-degree angle with your knee, ankle, and hip. See how that feels. And then if it still feels okay, that front leg, starting to bring it out a little bit into that, just drawing the foot away a little bit, and that's going to really crank up the intensity, the edge of that left hip, at least it does for me. And then pause here. And this is the hard one to find stillness in, because there are so many sensations happening. And a good way to check in to making sure that you haven't gone over your edge is to check in with your breath. Right? Our breath will always tell us. Our breath tells us when we're nervous. It gets a little bit more rapid. Our breath tells us when we're tired or sick. It's a little slower. Our breath tells us when we're exerting too much effort, because it also gets a little shorter and it's not as deep and full. When we're relaxed, it's nice and full and deep. See if you can find that equal parts breath. It doesn't have to be a big full inhale 5, exhale 5. Just make sure it's matching. That's going to help you know if you're at your edge or if you're over your edge. And depending on how you're feeling in that left hip, maybe it feels okay to start to lean forward over that front right leg. If you want to add in a twist, rotate toward the right leg and then start to lengthen out away from that right leg. That's going to get a little bit more into the spine. It's going to take some of that intensity off of that left hip. So just decide what you want to target. And then settle in there. Take a full inhale here. And exhale. Slowly come all the way back up if you're forward or twisted. And then lean over toward the right, drawing that left leg forward. And just pausing there for a moment. Check in, notice the energy that's moving through the body. Keeping the legs straight or bent in butterfly. Just noticing. So for this next one, hopefully you have either a bolster, some cushions, blocks handy for yourself. You can always bring yourself up onto your thigh, but we're going to do a little bit of a low lunge. It's called dragon. We haven't really done this one before yet. So when you're ready, go ahead and transition yourself onto your hands and knees. You can put any padding underneath that back knee if you need to, under the knees to begin. And then your blocks will just be forward so your hands can come on those blocks. And from here, you're going to take your right foot, step it forward, so your foot's on the floor. And then just kind of wiggle that left foot back until you start to feel a little sensation on the front thigh of that left leg. So we're kind of targeting that leg here today. You can uncurl the back toe. So it's going to let those hips drop. So you're getting into that connective tissue that surrounds the hip socket of the front. And just pause there. If there's too much stress on the knee, maybe try turning the toes in toward the midline of your body and your heel away from you if it's too much pressure on the knee. And you're going to notice you're going to have a little bit of contraction, compression on that right hip as well, as you're leaning your hips forward. And again, if you're okay here and this is, you're not quite at your edge, it's not that much for you, you can drop your elbows down toward those blocks and let yourself kind of hang out there. See if you can kind of let your shoulders relax as well. If this creates too much pressure on your wrists, you can always make fists so that you're stacking your wrists and there's not so much pressure on that wrist joint. Sometimes holding these longer poses, the wrists can take a little bit of an impact if we're holding these for too long. And just breathe here. So in this pose, it can actually hit all 6 meridians depending on your intention of what you would like to work through. If you're feeling the top of the back leg, so through that thigh, you're stimulating the stomach and spleen meridians. You're feeling it on your inner groins, either on the front leg or the back leg. You're stimulating that liver and kidney meridian. You're feeling it in your spine, maybe your low back down in that sacral area. That's getting into the urinary bladder and the kidney bladder. Sorry, the kidney meridian. And then if you're feeling it up, if we're doing a twist, right, maybe if you're leaning forward, you're feeling it more in your ribs a little bit because you're a little bit twisted. That's going to stimulate that gallbladder meridian. So since this one does take a little bit of energy to hold, right, there is a little bit of muscle, you can't completely relax into this one. But see if you can at least get that back leg, that left leg to relax a little bit more. Direct your breath and your awareness to where you feel tight, where you feel compression, tension. Few more cycles of breath here. Taking an inhale and let it go. If you're on your elbows, slowly start to come back up and then shift those hips back. Take that front leg, step it back, pausing there on the hands and knees, maybe tuck the toes or put a block underneath the hips and sit back for a moment. Letting that just rebound, taking a moment. If it feels good to do a little cat-cow, you have that as an option, as an in-between counter pose. Just kind of notice where you feel the energy flowing, where you feel a little bit more heat. And then when you're ready, we'll transition to the other side. So that left leg is going to come forward. You're just going to move that right leg back till you start to feel a little sensation there on that left thigh, or that right thigh. And then just hold in there. Uncurl the back toe. I always forget to tell myself that, so that leg can relax. And this is where the toe might turn in, so it's a natural tendency of our body as it relaxes. The toe will turn in, the heel will turn out. And then again, you have options to go a little bit deeper to the elbows. Maybe that feels better for the shoulders and the wrists. If that's not an option, maybe fists on the blocks. Or maybe even just your hands are on the floor, right? Maybe that feels better for you instead of the blocks. Maybe there's that little in-between spot. And just find your stillness here. See if you can relax that back leg as much as possible. You might be feeling it into a little bit of the low back, the top of the pelvis and where the spine meets. You might be feeling it in that right hip. Maybe in the left hip, there's a little compression there where your thigh and your hip bone meet. Maybe you're feeling some good bone stacking in your shoulders, to your elbows, to your wrists, if your arms are straight. Maybe building up a little bit of edge in the shoulders, in that shoulder joint, where the scapula meets that collarbone. Just bring your attention into those sensations that are happening. Just noticing what that sensation feels like. No judging it. Just being curious about it. And because this one is a little bit more intensive at any time you need to come out with any pose, you can always come out of any pose anytime your body feels it's right. Few more cycles of breath here. Take a deep inhale and let it go. Come back to your hands if you're not there already. And then shift the hips back, taking that left foot back, sitting back on your heels or sitting cross-legged even or on a block, a bolster, whatever's going to feel good here, and just pause. Maybe a few rounds of cat-cow. Noticing the effects of that pose. And then from here, we're going to transition into a little bit deeper hips. Definitely going to feel our hips tomorrow. Promise I'll be nice to you if you show up on Friday morning tomorrow. So this next one is called square, or log pose, it's also been known as. So you're going to come to seated on the floor with your bum. Maybe you need a cushion, maybe you don't. I know I need a little bit of a lift. So once you're there, you're going to cross your shins. And what you're going to try and do is try to start to move your shins forward until you start to feel this outer hip turn on. So it's kind of, it could be up, kind of higher up on your hip, or it might even be down more lower into your outer hip. You're just going to kind of walk those shins forward and then pause there, right? And then just kind of let the knees relax. If there's a lot of knee pressure, you can take a cushion and place that underneath the foot and the knee where it places so there's no pinching or stabbing in the knee, right? So it's going to target some of the knees, the low back, the outer hips. If you are here and you fold forward, right, we're gonna start to pull forward. If you really don't feel anything in your hips, you have the option of taking that right shin on top of your left knee, but make sure that left knee does go down all the way, and you can sit here in more of this log pose here, right? So you're gonna try to relax your legs as much as possible. That's why sometimes, for me at least, I know that's a little bit too much engaging for my hip, so my right shin in front. So it's either right shin on top or right shin in front. Try and take those shins as far away from you as possible so you can feel your hips, and then start to lengthen forward. So as you lengthen forward, your sit bones go back. And then you can either have your hands maybe back behind you and your head rests on maybe a bolster or a block out in front of you. Or maybe your arms go forward, same idea. Or if it feels okay, maybe your head just rounds in, your chin toward your chest, really targeting the whole spine. So again, I'm just kind of sitting up so you can hear me. You can round into it. Try to relax the legs. So a lot of times in a flow class, I'll tell you to engage your legs. See if you can relax the legs. Let the feet flop, right? You're just kind of pressing your sit bones down and then relaxing yourself forward. If this is too much on your knee, if it's just not going to happen for you today, you always have that reclining figure four. So you'll just do one leg at a time, reclining back. That's going to be a little nicer on the knees if you have some knee things going on today, if it doesn't feel right in the knee. But here again, the gallbladder meridian, outer hip. I'm targeting that a lot today. If you're feeling it on the inner knees or into the groin, that's targeting that liver and kidney meridians. You're feeling along the back of your legs, right, down into your sit bones, along the spine, especially if you're rounding into your spine. You're definitely getting into the urinary bladder meridian. Just kind of breathe where you feel those sensations the tightest. With directed awareness, can you almost imagine that edge lessening? Imagine it really targeting those soft tissues, the fascia that wraps our muscles, the tendons and ligaments that attach our muscles and bones to one another. Just a few more cycles of breath here. Taking a full inhale. And let it go. Slowly coming up. Unwinding those legs. Pausing there for a moment. So a lot of external rotation of those legs. A lot of work in the outer hips and the outer knees a little bit. Just notice how that feels. Take any movements that feel good, maybe pointing and flexing the feet. Maybe even leaning back into those hands to open up from the rounding, because we do have a second side. And then as you're ready, we'll transition to the second side. So go ahead and Cross those shins in front. I like to start with them closer, right? So your left shin will be in front. And I'm just going to start to scoot my shins away from me until I start to feel those outer hips. And then again, if you have more range of motion, if your hips are allowing you to do that naturally without pain, that left foot's going to be on top of the right knee, right? Preferably this leg would be touching, so you're not putting too much pressure on that leg. And then start to walk forward if it feels good. Sometimes just sitting up here feels good. Trying to keep those shins away from you so you're creating like this little space between your shins and your pubic bone. And then relax those legs. As I mentioned before, sometimes for me in poses like this where I'm used to holding them, I like to tense them just for a moment and then relax them. So my body really does know that I'm relaxing. I'm letting my muscle energy go, so I'm tapping into those softer tissues, those connective tissues. So I'm able to penetrate between the muscles to get into those meridian lines. Being able to bring some pressure to them by moving my body into a shape. And then directing my breath toward those areas to see if I can relax and find a little bit deeper edge as time goes on. Settle in here into stillness, into the sensations that are happening in the body. Become curious about those areas that are drawing your attention to them. Check in with your breath, keeping your inhales as deep as your exhales. Notice if there's anywhere that you're holding any tension, any gripping. Notice if there's anywhere you keep moving and fidgeting and distracting yourself. No judging, just noticing. A few more cycles of breath here. Take a full inhale here. And let it go. Slowly bringing yourself back up. Even more slowly, release those legs. Be mindful of the sensations that are going to happen as you extend those legs out. Take any motions you need to here to counter that pose. Sometimes with this one, I like to even bend my knees, and I like to lean back into my hands and kind of lift my hips for a moment and back down. Maybe not just a couple times. That feels good to me. It might not feel good if you have any elbow issues going on. Even windshield wiper legs feels good. And from here, we're going to transition onto our backs. We're getting closer toward the end of practice. This next one, you might want a little bit of padding under one knee. We're going to do a little bit of a twist, but it's more or less getting onto the outside of our leg. So it's not really a twist, it's getting into the outer edge of our leg. So I'm going to use my right leg first. So you can adjust if you need to. And I'm going to place just some bolsters on that side, maybe even have a block over there. You might even want to have your strap, depending on how intense you want this stretch to be. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your right leg, you're going to bend it, and you're going to kind of lean onto your left hip, right? So you're kind of leaning on your left like you're hanging out at the beach, you're turning to talk to your friend. And then if you want to have the strap, you're just going to place it around that right foot. And then from here, you're just going to take that right foot and draw it across your body. So it's going to be straight-ish, right? It may or may not go straight, right? It might be more toward your bottom leg, right? Staying upright, it's going to be a little bit more targeting into the arm, and you may not want that. So you can go ahead and lay down onto your left side, using your left arm as a pillow, or maybe using a block as a pillow. And then you can adjust that right leg. So that right leg is going to stay straight. And you're just going to feel it in that outer hip again, right into that gallbladder meridian, right? So stacking your hips, and just seeing how that feels. Back leg can totally relax. It can even be bent. Just kind of relax here for a moment, getting into this position. Just see how this feels. We're going to add on just a little bit. So see if you can relax that leg. Maybe you need a little bit more padding underneath that knee so that there's not a lot of pressure pushing down on that inner side of that right leg. So this is kind of like your phase one. Maybe your left hand reaches more toward your shin, your ankle, maybe your toe, if that's accessible, or the strap. And then your next phase, where if you want to go, is you can open yourself up a little bit more and taking that top hand and placing it on your ribs. So kind of just opening up. And you'll notice as you open up, that's going to create a little bit more sensation on that outer hip. And then maybe that left hand kind of slides down the strap, if you have the strap toward the foot. So you're using a little bit of energy with your hands, and you're targeting that outer hip, but you're trying to keep your muscles relaxed. So getting into that outer hip on the top leg. So you might even feel it in your top thigh, right? And that's going to be going into that stomach and spleen meridian. If you're feeling it in your back because you're opening up a little bit for the twist, that's your urinary bladder meridian. If there's any tingling or numbness, that just means that you're pinching a nerve. So you want to adjust the pose, come out of it a little bit so that you're not having that tingling, especially on your shoulder or even in the outer hip. Might even mean you're locking your knee out too much, like hyperextending it. So just give a little give into the knee to allow that nerve to get blood flow to the leg. So you're feeling like you have a good edge on your top hip, and you can keep that. You have a nice edge in your spinal column, and that feels good. If you want to adding on just a little bit into the top thigh of the bottom leg, you can bend that bottom leg. Take your right hand and see if you can catch the top of your foot. See if that's accessible. So catching the top of the foot on the left foot with the right hand. So in Yin, this pose is called a cat pulling its own tail pose, which is kind of interesting. And as you lay here in this pose, if you're in that final stage, trying to figure that out of how this looks like a cat pulling its own tail, I do not know. You have very creative imaginations when it comes to naming Yin poses. A few more cycles of breath here. Take a full inhale here. And let it go. Release that bottom foot if you have it. Roll yourself back toward your left side. Go ahead and use that left arm as a pillow. Bend your top knee. Extend that top leg out. And then roll yourself onto your back. Go ahead, bend your knees for a moment. Pause there. Just check in with that right side, noticing those sensations that are happening on that right side. Take any movements that feel good, maybe windshield wiper the legs, maybe a little bridge lift, whatever's going to feel good for a counter pose. And then as you're ready, transferring anything that you might have used on that side over to the opposite side, so it's there in case you need it. And then from here, you're going to go ahead and roll yourself over onto your right side. And you might want to prop yourself up on your elbow to begin. Maybe if you're going to use the strap, put it around that left foot. And then roll all the way onto that right side and then take that left leg across the body. Right, so left leg's across the body. Maybe you stay up on your elbow. Maybe you're fine staying here. You have enough intensity. You're happy. Bottom leg can kind of relax and bend. Otherwise, if it's going to be too much on the shoulder, go ahead and lay down onto your right side. Use that arm as a pillow or a blanket or actual pillow as a pillow. And then start to settle in there. Start to notice where you need any extra attention on that side, whether it be on the knee, the ankle, the foot. And then again, if you're not really feeling any edge there, start to roll the chest open toward the ceiling so that that left shoulder drops back and that left hand comes to your ribs. So it might turn on the energy. Maybe that strap's around the leg and you're using your hand to help guide that leg a little bit closer toward your head, so getting into the outer hip. And be mindful you're not holding that leg with your muscle, you're relaxing the leg. Getting into those softer tissues, the connective tissues, rather than the muscle tissues. And if at any point you want a deeper sensation on the spine, that left arm can come out like a cactus. Maybe it reaches up overhead. That'll definitely get a little bit more into the twist. Or you can just have it rest on your ribs, on your shoulder. Be mindful there's not any little tingling sensations that are happening in the arm or the leg. Once you found that edge, just pause. Find some stillness. And if you're feeling good in that outer hip and into the spine, and you feel like you have a little bit further to go for an edge. Maybe that bottom leg, you're gonna bend the knee toward your bum. And you're gonna reach down with that left hand and see if you can catch the top of that left foot. Sorry, left hand to right foot. Making myself into a pretzel. And then pause there. Maybe you find that creates too much sensation, too much gripping in maybe the booty or the glutes. So maybe you just release that foot and it's just still bent and your arm can relax. Mindful of your breath here. A lot of sensations happening in the body, just scanning over and directing your awareness to the place that feels the most compression or tension, the most sensation. And using that breath and using the directed awareness, try and bring more energy to that area to allow it to come away from its edge. Few more cycles of breath here. Take your full inhale here. And let it go. If you have that bottom foot, release it. Go ahead and roll yourself back over to your right side. Use that right arm as a pillow. And then start to bend that top leg, extending the leg out. And then roll yourself over onto your back. Pausing there, either legs bent or legs straight. Feeling the effects of the pose on the body. Doing any motions that feels good after that. Maybe wiper legs, maybe just a little lift in the hips. Whatever feels good here. We've really targeted the outer hips today. So sometimes just having those knees drop out wide, kind of little butterfly legs, kind of helps those areas release a little bit. We're coming into our final pose before Shavasana, just a simple two-leg twist getting into the spine. Go ahead and draw those knees back up to center. Shift your hips over to the right. And then bend your knees so knees and hips stack, ankles and knees are in line. And drop those knees over to the left. As you drop the knees over to the left, you may have to draw that left hip under a little bit more. You may need some padding underneath that from your knees to give yourself a little bit more lift on that top leg. And then your right arm's gonna start to open out toward the right. Your chest's gonna start to lift toward the ceiling. Maybe even that left hand just rests on top of that top thigh. Your right arm can come like a cactus if that feels good. If that's too much on the shoulder, hand can come to the shoulder or toward the ribs. Maybe your head looks the same direction as your knees. Maybe it looks to the ceiling. Maybe it looks over to the opposite side, over toward that right shoulder. Just settle in here. Few more cycles of breath here. Nice full inhale. And side out. Go ahead and draw that right arm back over across the body. Remove any padding that you might have in your knees. Bring your knees back up to center. Shift them back to center. Pause there for a moment. Let that back rest on the floor. Bring it back to neutral. Just noticing the effects of the pose. And then slowly shifting the hips to the left. Draw those knees up toward the ceiling first. And then drop the knees over to the right. Maybe adjusting those legs so the hips are stacked. Any padding you need, anything you need there. And then start to open the chest toward the ceiling as that left shoulder drops back. Either hand on ribs or arm like cactus. And then maybe that right hand just presses gently on the top of that top thigh, giving it just a little extra weight to bring it down. And then settle in with your breath. A few more cycles of breath here. And taking a full inhale here. And let it go. Slowly taking that left arm back over toward the right. And then drawing those knees back up to center. Shifting the hips, pausing there, letting the spine rebound back to neutral. And then when you're ready, extend those legs out, point through the toes, reach the arms back behind the head, give yourself a long stretch, open up the front of the body. We did a lot of forward bending today. And then slowly release that, taking yourself into whatever position for Shavasana that's going to feel best to you. Letting your legs open up maybe a little bit deeper, maybe covering your eyes. Having any support under the low back, the knees, maybe even the cervical spine or the neck that feels good to you. And allow those arms to, the palms turn up, to allow yourself to surrender, opening the chest. We'll just take one cleansing breath here. Take a full inhale. Fill up the belly, the ribs, the chest. Hold the breath for a moment. Bring that intention back to mind. And then let go of that breath. As you let go, allow yourself to surrender into Shavasana. Surrendering completely here, mentally, physically. For a few moments in complete relaxation. I'll bring us out of this pose with 3 bells. Take rest. Feeling free to stay here if you need to restore a little bit longer. If you're ending now, go ahead and take a few deeper breaths. Maybe on your next breath, bring some movement into the fingers and toes, maybe the wrists and ankles. And then on your next breath, reach arms back behind your head, slide your feet together, give yourself a long stretch again, from fingers to toes. And then draw those knees into the chest, wrap the arms around the knees, maybe even draw the forehead toward the knees, giving yourself a little hug, rounding the spine. And then moving in any way that feels good, maybe little wiper legs, maybe just rocking from side to side. In your own time, as you are ready, roll to one side and pause there. Scan over the body, check in with the mind, just acknowledge the shifts from the practice. Check in with those hips. And then when you're ready, mindfully press yourself all the way up to seated. If your eyes have opened along the way, allow them to close. Bring your hands in front of your heart center, cupped over your heart. Bring yourself into the room, onto your mat, into your body. Acknowledging the strength, the energy, and the breath that this practice has created for you. And allow that to help you as you transition off your mat into your evening ahead. We'll seal this practice in with either one Om or a sigh of the breath, your choice. Exhale fully. Take a nice full inhale. Bowing the head slightly. Take a moment. Think of one thing in your life that you truly are grateful for. And then hold on to that image in your mind's eye as you raise your head with a smile. Drink lots of water. Eat your veggies. Wear some sunblock. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.